We're set up though.
These stairs.
Long story, I need a much longer USB cable. That's what I really need. I need like a 12-foot USB cable. I'm going to buy that for next time.
Okay. And Drew was suggesting that maybe we shell out some money for converters.
I have one here. So, like, it does HDMI, and I have an HDMI to USB-C. And then I think there was an Apple one here too. Oh, there's a bunch of them down here.
Oh, okay.
I'll just put these here.
I think there's one that's for.
There is a VGA, VGA to display port. Shit, that's not going to do it.
Now I forgot. Oh, he has like a mini display port or something. He has
A mini display port, there is one of those to HDMI. So that one's okay. What there's not is VGA to HDMI.
God, I hope nobody needs that.
Yeah, I hope not either. So that's what we got. I brought one, and then there's a bunch from Qualcomm. And then we'll see how it goes. Oh, somebody's in the chat.
We'll see, you seriously do need a.
Yeah, I need a much longer cable.
Well,
I don't think there's-
that's your power cable, right?
That's my power cable, but like if I had a longer USB cable, I could just sit at my
yeah.
desk and do it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's power here, so like, yeah, there's nothing I can do. Oh, there is, but it's not power that I can use. It is occupied.
Oh.
So, yeah, there's nothing I can do here.
Yeah.
Oh well, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's okay. Just, nobody should be down here anyway. Okay.
Okay. I'll go back up.
Cool. And then I have a microphone. This is like a clip-on mic for people to use.
Cool.
We'll see if that works. That's for the live stream. The live stream. We'll see how well that goes.
That's different from the microphone that
Right. It's different from the room mic.
talks to us.
Yep.
So is Hobson not coming? I mean,
I know. He forgot some things one day. I'm going to go see if I can talk to him. Can I leave you in here?
yes.
All right, I'm going to talk to. Oh, hold on, it dropped.
Oh, okay.
I'm just gonna buy like an 18-foot USB cable, and then I think then I can use it over here. That's probably good, right? How long is that? That's about 8 more feet, and that's probably a 6-foot cable. So yeah, you probably run 18 to 24 feet.
Do USBs max out at the length?
I don't know. HDMI's can, but usually it's pretty long. And you can bump the transmit power on HDMI. It takes more power on device, but whatever. I've done it before. It works okay. Hopefully all of this just works.
This is where I always sit. This is where I always sat in class in college. Second row.
Second row. That way you're far enough that nobody wants to call on you, but close enough.
This is where I sit in college too, second row. I guess the third row.
I usually sat towards the back.
I would sit very back, very corner.
Well, I've always had bad eyes, so I can't, if I'm too far away, then I can't see.
Yeah, I can't pay attention anyway, so.
Although actually, it's, I have a place in my yard.
Well, you can pull this out.
I know.
It's enough like full already.
Oh, I have this too.
There was something I was gonna tell you to remind you to talk about, not drive.
So we need more organizers?
Well, yeah, that one.
I'll make sure to note that. I printed out the agenda since all my devices are occupied. Rather sad. But that's how it has to go. I'm gonna pressure those people up there.
Yeah. We should get started.
We should get started.
Which by 10. Yes.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Live streamers are all making rude comments on YouTube now?
I don't think I've seen any rude comments on YouTube yet,
Alright,
but, you know,
it's due.
I'm gonna switch over and.
Too much sense. Wait a minute.
I guess it's not as fast as it might be typing, but.
Alright.
I don't know. A couple of right-handed ones for pulling wheelchairs.
Is the projector on?
I mean, it could be.
Did I turn that on?
Oh, yeah. Actually, if you would, that would be good. I didn't. That's on. And we're live. Hopefully you can hear me. We're going to get, this mic's working. Hopefully this mic's also working. But we're going to get started in 2 minutes. I'm pressuring the people outside to come in. I know the food's delicious, but, you know, hear me. Come inside. Come inside. Pressure those people to come in. You turned on the projector? Because I didn't test it, actually. So hopefully it's good. Yeah, yeah. I don't need it for like 10 minutes, but oh, yeah, it's turning on. Okay. All right, people are filing in. Those people need to come in. I'm still on. All right, for real, I'm starting announcements. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how to manage that well. You gotta find somebody who doesn't like Python to do the volunteer thing at the door. C# person, or Perl person, or something.
All right, people are coming in. I'm going to just get started. I know the food was delicious, so thank you. I do want to, you're here at San Diego Python, so you're in the right place. That's a good thing. And I want to thank Qualcomm for allowing us to be here, and specifically the Engineering Development Org, formerly known as the Learning Center, I've heard. And I want to thank Microsoft for sponsoring the food and refreshments. So that was super delicious. Thanks, those were awesome. And I want to thank my co-organizer, Diane, who helps wrangle all the speakers and make sure we have good talks on a monthly basis. So that's real good. I have a couple small announcements before we dive into the first talk. We do still have a Saturday meetup. It is still virtual at this time. It's 10 a.m. on Saturdays. Check the meetup page. We're on meetup.com/pythonsd. You'll find us. All the details are there. It's a little bit different than this meetup. So this meetup has talks and a speaker lineup and things like that. It's on a monthly basis. That one is more of a bring your laptop. It's on Zoom right now. And it's kind of a little bit different, more of a bring your own project kind of a thing, collaborate with other people. But it's a cool meetup. We have a website, sandiegopython.org. So there's a code of conduct on there, links to all the other stuff, like when our next meetup is, links to the meetup page. And a link to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@sandiegopython. We're also live streaming. Hopefully it's working. You know, it's dubious, but I try. We have a Discord if you want to like chat with other local Python people. We moved to Discord from Slack for a few issues, but you know, you can just get an invite off of the homepage, off of sandiegopython.org, join yourself, and there's like different channels for various things, one of which is for jobs. We'll talk about that in a second. I did just want to highlight a couple upcoming Python conferences that are coming up. PyCascades is going to be in Vancouver, British Columbia in spring. They haven't finalized the date yet. That's sort of like a conference that actually a surprising number of San Diego people will go to. Like, I think the last time I was there were 7 or 8 San Diego people. It was crazy. PyTexas is April 1st and 2nd in Austin. And PyCon US is going to be April 19th to 27th in Salt Lake City. So check those out. You know, if you Google PyTexas or PyCon US, you'll find all the details. We do have open jobs. If anybody wants to post on the jobs channel in Discord, you can promote your job to local people. If anybody right now has an opening at their company and you want to shout it out, you know, there's not as many people here as there are in the Discord, but if anybody's company is hiring and you want to say something, now's the time if you want to say anything. Nobody? O'Reilly's hiring? All right. Just check out the O'Reilly careers page.
Sure, yeah.
What are you hiring for?
Well, it says senior back-end and front-end, but also if they really like you, they'll make a job for you. So
All right.
if you're interested, just apply.
So back end, front end, or they'll make a job for you if you want.
Yeah. Oh, and data engineering.
And data engineers? All right, cool. Jay, what's up?
I don't know if our team isn't, but I know that GitHub is hiring a senior technical writer.
Oh, okay.
If you like writing about the stuff that you're building, that's an opportunity there.
Okay, GitHub's hiring a senior technical writer. That's cool. Awesome. And that would be Microsoft, part of Microsoft, adjacent Microsoft. Anyway, cool. Awesome. And if you're on the live stream, because we're live streaming, and you're from somewhere other than the greater San Diego area, feel free to post the city or the country you're visiting us from in the chat. And I did also want to mention that you too can become a speaker. We're always looking for talks of all skill levels. I'll post a link in the chat. But off of our homepage also, sandiegopython.org, there's a link to like, I want to sign up to give a talk. You could sign up for the next meetup. You can sign up for a future meetup. You know, they're usually only 5 to 7 minute talks. Some talks, as this one setting up here, looks like it's going to be longer, but most talks are 5 to 7 minutes. So like, you'll make it. You'll survive. And we're always looking at all skill levels, whether it's like the problems you ran into with your initial Python environment, or you want to give an advanced NumPy talk. I want both of those and everything in between. So please, please, please. And if the world doesn't fall apart between here and March, we'll be here in this room through at least March. Although I did want to mention, so usually 4th Thursday, but not in December. We'll be here on the 3rd Thursday, which is the 15th, because the 4th Thursday is like the 22nd. I won't be here, so 3rd Thursday next month, and also on the live stream. I also wanted to just thank our other sponsor, JFrog. That's a DevOps platform for continuous releases. Basically, if you need something like an internal PYPI behind your company firewall or something like that, that is literally a product that they have. So check it out. Awesome. Oh, yeah, and if you want to help organize with San Diego Python, please get in touch with one of the organizers. There is always stuff to do. Awesome. Without further ado, our first speaker is Jay. What? Oh, you want to be the second speaker?
I mean, I can present, yeah.
Okay. Jay is going to talk to us about GitHub's API and nested issues. And I'll let you take it away, Jay.
My computer's about to die, so...
Hopefully you make it. This is the clip-on mic.
Okay.
Hopefully it works.
Is there an outlet? Because
There is an
otherwise there won't be a talk.
USB-C power.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, we're good. Oh, yeah, I need,
USB-C power if you need some.
I think there's an outlet right there.
now we've got a couple of things, so I'm going to pause and give David time to do stuff. Which, by the way, I think I told everyone that is in person here, but the food, all of the food is vegan friendly, and all of the traditional Mexican dishes there are gluten free. And also take it with you. I don't want to take it home. Are we good? We're good? Okay. Cool. So, the last time we met, I was showing everyone, oh, I'm supposed to put this on. Hold on, do I need to just hold this or does it matter?
Flip it on.
Just flip it on? Okay, I wasn't sure if there was. I feel sorry for everyone online as they're dealing with static. All right, so I think we can mask off when we're speaking? Okay, cool. It's like the first time I've done this before. Just kidding, it's not. Hi, for those that don't know me, I'm Jay Miller. I am, I think now officially one of the co-organizers for San Diego Python. I'm also a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. I focus on Python, the Python community, and ways that Microsoft can be involved in it, especially around their cloud services like Azure and some of their freer tools like VS Code. One of those tools is GitHub. GitHub as a service, but also as a product. The last time we met, I showed everybody a really cool trick with GitHub issues. Did you know that there are ways that you can create issue templates? Most people know that part. It starts by putting a markdown file in your issue_templates folder, all capitalized, and then from there, what you put there will be available to people when they hit new issue. The thing that I showed was you can also do that with YAML, and by doing that you get a little bit more dynamic of content. In fact, I will, and I'm sorry for your retinas, I will show you what that looks like by going to the first slide there. It's where you can actually enforce certain standards. If you want true or false, if you want a URL, if you want things like that, like you can specifically say, I want this here and it's required. You have to put it here if you want to file an issue. That's great, but if you ever hit the edit button, it just takes you back to those original things. So the thing that I wanted to show you was we can use that to our advantage to do things like access those issues via their API, and then we can build off of those things. So I'm kind of combining two of my talks into one for time, but then also to just kind of show you this and speed up the process in my episode 1 or episode 2 of question mark series on this area. So I talked about what we did last time. This time I want to talk about, first of all, what is an API? Because I want to get everybody on the same page. An API is basically just a set of instructions for how your product can interact with, or I guess how people can interact with your product. Most of them involve code. Actually, I think all of them involve code. Sometimes that code is like an HTML call. I'd still call that code. GitHub has what we call a REST API, which means I send a URL request to their server, and then they give me back data. Now, how they choose to give me back that data is up to them. They give it to me in JSON. I think you can also get it in XML. I wouldn't, but you can. And you can actually see GitHub's API by going to api.github.com. python.com. In fact, if I click on it, you can't see that. So let's see if I drag this over. There we go. If I click on it, that's kind of what you get. Don't worry too much about what it says, because that part's not important. But what is important is I got to that by entering a URL in the URL bar, or in my case, clicking a link, and we were able to get data. Now that means I can get data about a lot of things in GitHub. I can get data on my user account. I can get data on a repository that I have in GitHub. I can get data, if your repository is public, on your repository. The way that GitHub makes sure that we don't take advantage of this is they do what's called rate limiting, and you can get a key and all this other stuff. But ultimately, the important thing is if I know the URL, I can get the data. So what is the URL that we're looking for? In our case, let me get rid of this joker. Goodbye. Okay, here we go. Are we back on our slides? There we go, we're back on our slides. So earlier, I said we got these GitHub issues. Well, like I mentioned, I can access things like GitHub issues via their API. In fact, if I know the repo owner, the name of the repo, and the issue number, then I can actually get the output of that issue and then do whatever I do with it. Now, the story around Python and GitHub, it's kind of mid, honestly. There isn't really an official Python SDK for GitHub. The ones that people have made are to cover their kind of specific use cases. And also, the API is really easy to work with, so people have made plenty. In fact, what we're going to do is talk about the one that I made, because why not? But if you're looking for the solution to all of your GitHub needs via GitHub API, there is one. It's called GH API. It's okay. Okay. That said, you're better off just knowing how to get the information yourself. But I wanted to take a second and say, like, here is what I use it for. I created this tool called GH Issues. It's mine. I made it just for me. You can use it too. In fact, if you want to use it, you can go pip install gh-issues, and that's how you get it. But what I do is I use another tool called Markdown@Py to take the markdown from GitHub issues, and don't parse everything. Just parse some of it. And by some of it, I mean just headers and paragraphs. Leave everything else the way that it is, because I want to work with that later by putting it into newsletter services like Button Down, put it into things like my website, which takes Markdown and converts it into HTML. I just want to be able to figure out what's what. And what I do is I use HTTPX, which is similar to requests, which is a way that you can access URLs using Python, to make a call to that issue API endpoint. And because David told me originally I was going second, we are going to try to do this live. However, I don't know if I'm prepared to do this or not. So I am going to ask for just a second so that I can kind of put some stuff together here. Because otherwise this will be really interesting as I try to mirror my display, I guess. There we go. All right, so you see what I see. You still see what I see. That's good. Double check. So I mentioned this in the last month's meetup. I do a podcast called Python Community News. It is myself and my co-host, John Bonifato, talking about all the news around the Python community that doesn't involve pip install. Did you know that the Django Software Foundation elections are happening right now, and there are more people running than have ever ran before? You should, if you are a part of the Django community, definitely go and support that by going and voting, just like hopefully the people that chose to vote did last week as well. Stuff like that. We try to make sure that we can give that information to people. In fact, if I remember correctly, there is a GitHub issue on that right there. That's GitHub issue number 72. Django board candidates are now available. And we can see this. It's an issue. It follows that template. As I mentioned before, if I go into edit, we see it's just Markdown. It's all broken down into Markdown. So I'm going to actually create a new project here. So I'm not cheating. We're going to call this SD Python, because why not? And we're going to, okay, that's up and running. Let's create a new environment, because we don't want to mess up anything else, and we also don't want to do things that we haven't done before. So let's see, creating an environment created, everything is good. We'll close that. We'll reopen it. Okay, we're in a virtual environment. And let me make this a little bit larger so people can read it. We can read that, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm going to pip install gh issues, if I can spell it. There we go. It's going to install some things. Okay, it's done. And now what we're going to do is we're going to just create a new file here. And from gh issues, we're going to import repo. Maybe. There we go. And we're going to import issue. Not issue parser. Come on. Come on. Stop. There we go. Issue. All right. So the first thing we have to do is we have to define the repo. Why? Because we need to know whose issues are we pulling from. This is a simple data class. The issue owner, or the org, is Python Community News. And the repo is topics. So from there, I need to create an issue object, and we're going to say the repo is this repo that we just defined. Scratch that. Let's go back, and we're going to go from issue number. So issue from issue number. I don't have all the raw metadata yet. I need to go pull it from GitHub's API. So I use from issue number to say, hey, I'm going to give you an issue number. The issue number isn't the ID. The ID is some string of alphanumeric characters that I don't know how to memorize. But you know what I do know how to memorize? 74, he says. 72. So I can say repo issue number 72. And now what you would get normally is what we thought before we have that raw JSON. You can work with that, but it's kind of not that fun to work with. Instead, we're going to save that in issue, and we're going to just print issue, maybe, issue. We'll do title for now. Okay, we'll save that, and we'll run it. And what we should get, here we go. I don't know if you can read that or not, but Django board candidates are now available. One shot in a live code, I love it. Now, the nice thing about this is we have all these titles up here. So we have a summary, we have a URL, and we have that other long one. I don't want to type that in. Let's do something like print, well, let's just see our whole body first. And then, yeah, we'll run it again, why not? Yeah, that's right. I did put an underscore in there. If you want to know about the error correction here, check out Trey's talk from last month. It was really good on error correction. But you can see the actual content there in its entirety. But let's just say I want that URL. Now you're telling me that I can get the actual value of the markdown inside of the issue that I wrote. And the answer is yes, yes you can. Because it took all of those markdown headers and turned them into class attributes. So when I hit play, what we should get is just the URL for that inside of that issue itself. I would tell you wait, there's more. Actually, I will tell you wait, there's more. And this will be the last thing that I show you. I can't do it on that one because there is none there, but I do know that this is also how we build our newsletter and our show notes for the podcast. And we have a special template that we called publish, or podcast template, that has nested issues inside of it. This is the cool part. This is issue number 57. So we're going to change this to 57. And we can get the title, but instead what we also want to do is we want to say other issues equals issue. Come on, autocorrect for me because I almost always mess this up. Nope, come on. This is where Jay cheats a little bit and goes into his repo. By the way, this is an open source project, and if you want to contribute to it, let me know. What do I call this? Get content issues. Come on, I see how it is. Get content issues, and we want to get them from wherever those issues exist, which is, in this case, oh, look at that, it's called issues. Actually, we'll do conferences because I know David mentioned there are a lot of great conferences available. So we do get issues from there, and then we can do for issue and other issues. We're going to print issue title. So this should give us a list of every conference that we talked about in the last episode. We run it, PyCon Ireland, JupyterCon 2023, and PyCon 2022. So the only way that I was able to do this was by understanding that all this is doing is sending those URL signals out. All it's doing is saying, what is the URL that I need to go to? And I programmatically plug those in every single time. Every time it pulls one of those, it's making a call to GitHub's API and saying, give me this information. From there, I'm able to work within GitHub without ever going into GitHub. Thank you.
Are you willing to take questions?
If there are questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Okay, hi.
So I saw that you were sort of creating attributes based on data in the Markdown.
Mm-hmm.
What if there's a collision between like issue.title and you have a header in the Markdown title?
So the question was if there's an issue, or if there's a collision between two variables. So the last one will win. So if you put title inside of your issue, it will overwrite your actual title. Actually, that's a good question. What I will tell you is this project is open source, and if you want to prevent things like that happening in the future, you can easily contribute to it. That being said, that is something that I've thought about, and that is something that we're trying to figure out, because right now, basically, I'm using it and no one else. It's like, I know how to prevent that from happening. I just won't use title as the value. But we are doing some things to kind of normalize it, like if you want to actually, you won't collide with any of GitHub's API endpoints because we actually convert those and put like a dunder, well not a dunder, we put an underscore in front of it to hide it from the class spec itself. You can still get to them if you know where they are, like how I did underscore body, but you're not going to overwrite them intentionally, except for apparently title, because that's the one property value that I specifically coded because I use it all the time. Were there, yes?
Are you using this as any part of like CI/CD or testing workflow?
So there is potential for that. That's something that we're thinking about. I did show this to my team, and we are trying to workshop ways that we can incorporate it into our existing pipeline. But at the moment, no. That said, we are using it, as I mentioned before, to build our website, send out our newsletter, and basically do all of that programmatically. So what our show notes show are also what our newsletter are, and I have to run one script one time, and it does everything, including schedule the newsletter for me. And that's actually based on a value inside of the GitHub issue. Yeah. And you could also do things like tagging. You could tag your GitHub issues based on tags in the issue itself, which is kind of interesting. Any other questions? Yes?
Does GitHub check frequently when you want to post it?
So does GitHub check it? GitHub doesn't really check it. I have to manually run it. I could set this up to run on something like GitHub Actions, and then which I control how often I want it to run for things. GitHub Actions is pretty good about that, though. You can specify when you want things to generate. For instance, you could do like workflow dispatch, which means it only runs when I tell it to run. Or you could do like whenever an issue is created that is labeled with whatever tag, that could be the only time that I get these to run. In fact, that's actually one of the things that we want to do in the future is say, once we apply the tag to give the go-ahead and parse that information and build out our web page so that once a podcast episode goes out, the archive page for that podcast is out at the same time. All right, I've taken up enough time, so I'm gonna.
Thanks, Jay. No, I think you're good. Everything looked good on there. Thanks, Jay. Our next speaker is going to be Drew Arnett, who's going to talk to us about an experimental contest logger.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, all this jargon.
And it's going to be about 10 minutes, and hopefully the AV setup is good.
We can keep it quick.
You can clip this on, and then other people can hear. Maybe.
Excellent.
And then hopefully you have. So there's a bunch of dongles here.
I've got
You
one
have
right here.
USB-C? You have USB-C.
On that one.
Oh.
That's true.
You need to hook up the other.
I got HDMI on there too. Yeah, I haven't used the USB-C on this one.
Just use this one.
Let's
then.
find out what it does.
Let's find out what it does.
I don't think I've actually ever plugged this particular laptop into a projector, so this will be fun. Excellent. Hi, I'm Drew Arnett. Thanks for coming today. I'm an electrical engineer, electronics engineer, and I've been using Python for all things electrical engineering for 20 years. And I've been looking for a more productive programming language since then, and I haven't found it yet. So when you find it, let me know. It's a high bar, though. Let's see. Nope, not what I want to do there. Now we wait for the spinning wheel there. Come on. So I'm going to talk about an experimental contest logger. There'll be a little bit of jargon, so feel free to call me out if I use some jargon. But in this particular hobby project, in this particular hobby, there is a lot of jargon. So amateur radio, aka ham radio, that's still a thing. Maybe 0.1% of the population to 0.5% of the population has the radio bug to some degree. And there's the amateur radio service, which is one of many FCC managed radio services. There's lots of things in that hobby, many different things people do. So is this taking the hobby too seriously? Friend bought a used TV news van with a pneumatic mast. You push the button and it goes up. And another guy's got a Jeep loaded with gear. This is an inside picture of all the gear inside of the van. Here's a setup inside of the back of the Jeep. He built a little desk that bolts onto the back of the front driver's seat. So we'll go out and we'll do some radio contesting out in the mountaintops around Southern California. Or is this taking the hobby too seriously? I don't know if this picture's quite big enough, but you see this this country estate with these 100-foot towers with stacks of Yagi antennas for the shortwave bands. And here's the radio room with many, many, many operating positions with computers and radios and a staff to contest. Sometimes we take our hobbies too seriously. So what is amateur radio contesting? So it's a planned event. There's a fixed time slot. You're trying to work as many stations as possible, or as many stations per band as possible, or as many stations per band per mode as possible, depending on the particular contest. And when I say work, I'm talking about a two-way information exchange, particular to what it is for that contest. For some contests, that's just the call sign and a contact serial number. The first station you work, you tell them they're number 1. The second one, you tell them you're number 2, and so on. When you hear the other stations giving out 2,000, 3,000, or whatever, it's a little humbling, but that's the way it goes. Some of the events, you're giving out the call sign, a contact serial number, and a category, and a year that you're first licensed, and a location, and you feel quite exhausted after that's happened, after 24 hours of that. So there's dozens of contests every week. Then there's the major contests, right? The majors. CQ worldwide, I checked, and the single operator, so one person, hourly rate record, and by rate I mean how many contacts completed and logged in an interval of time. For phone or voice modes, 407 in an hour, and for Morse code or CW, 450 per hour. So this is a bit of a high-paced event for the serious folks. I'm not that serious, but you know, and yeah, that is more than 7 per minute for over an hour continuous. The good operators, they actually get bored. They run 2 radios at once because 1 at a time is not enough. So I'm also not that good. With the contesting, it's kind of interesting because you can do search and pounce. You tune around, you look for a station that's calling, and then you work them, and then you tune around, look for another one. And then there's running. So when you're the big dog and you're loud, you just get on one frequency and you call, people come and find you and they'll line it up and you hope you work them fast. Really, for a contest, you have to do a little bit of both. So do people just use the radio and sit in front of the radio? No, they use contest logging software, because back in the old days, they used a paper log. You'd write down the time, call sign, exchange information, all that good stuff. Doing it by paper, I'll forget the time, I'll forget to note the time, I'll forget to write down what band it was if I changed bands, things like that. So using software is great for that. Also in the paper days, they also used a dupe sheet, because you don't get credit for working them twice. So they used a paper hash table. And the hashing function was on the suffix of the call sign, and you actually would usually have a second guy there with you. So when you hear a call sign, he'd be like, he'd look on the hash sheet and see, did you work them already? And he'd be like, no, go ahead and work them, and he'll write down that new one on the hash sheet. So the amateur radio people know hash tables, but we don't use those anymore, right? We just use dictionaries and maps and things these days. But the software, the big part of it's data entry. There's macros. There's enter-send mode, which helps you avoid pushing the macros. You just hit enter, and it knows the sequence of things to do. Duplicate detection. There's known call signs. So there's a database somebody publishes of all the known contesters. So there's these known call signs. So you get some hinting, because you hear some call sign, maybe there's a lot of noise, interference. You don't know if you have it right. So that's one thing the software will help out with. Also, people sometimes remember what information somebody gave before. They remember that Bill is over in Iowa or whatever it is. But people have also built databases where they fill out for this particular event, what was the information people gave out the year previous. So the software can hint with that as well. You still need to listen, because if it's different and you log it wrong, you'll lose credit for that contact. Some of the software do analytics, rate, pace, goals, mults needed. There's automated sending, so you don't want to call again and again and again. Your voice will wear out, or with the Morse code key, it gets tired out, so the computer can do that calling for you automatically. Or your exchange information, the computer can send that. Assistance, there's systems where you can get some assistance. If people from outside sources where, oh, we heard this station on this frequency, you might go look for them. Log file, that's something you need to put together when you're done and send it into the contest organizer. They'll cross-reference those and they'll tell you exactly what you copied incorrectly, which is great. And then multi-operator stuff where they do logging between the software. So you have several stations working together in one location, and you'll network them so you can see the aggregate scores and all that kind of stuff, and dupe checking and everything. Incumbents in this field, N1MM has got about 75-90% market share, something huge. It's Microsoft Windows only, C# freeware, closed source, and support, write logs, the second most common, C#, Microsoft Windows, commercial GUI, long tail with many others. TLF is the only open source one. It's Linux C curses, and it's decent, but it's not there, and I thought I could pitch in and help out with it, but I can also write something in Python from scratch just as faster than I can help out with that. Market, so CQ Worldwide is the largest DX contest, 18,000 logs turned in. Field day, 10,000 logs, 20,000 participants, and 10,000 logs, there's actually more computers involved than 10,000, so multiply by about 3 or 4 or so. The big database of known contesters is 60,000 people, so this is a tiny market. This is not going to scale, right? This is not a commercial venture. Challenges with the software: customization for many different contests and flavors. Somebody's got a collection of like 400, he publishes a calendar. He's got like 450 different events in his database for the calendar. But the software's predominantly UI, UX kind of stuff, sequencing, automation. But this is easy because we're using Python, right? We're not going to write this in C or C# or anything like that. I was really motivated because I use N1MM with other people on Windows machines when we get together a couple times a year, because that's what they use, but it's got some annoyances. It's a GUI. Focus might be out of the window, all kinds of stuff. Everyone's got different preferences. I was wondering, with Python, how much can I do with how little code, right? What if you did the software only for one contest and you didn't try to support 450 contests? Does that wean down and make that code a lot leaner? I like writing portable code, and Python's good at that. And I mean, why do we write anything not portable? I have to wonder. And I wanted to see if there's some innovation exploration to do. TUI, I want to do a text user interface. I want to get rid of the GUI. You know, Windows focus problems during a contest. Again, you're going at a very fast rate. Having the focus in the wrong place for the data entry is not cool. Reaching for a mouse, that's also bad. Why am I reaching for a mouse? I don't need the mouse. My favorite one is the heel of my palm, hitting the trackpad, taking the focus to God knows where, and it's like, oh, yeah. Also, a 40-watt laptop is kind of gross for portable battery, low-power operation. If you got a 5-watt radio and you're running a 40-watt laptop with it and running off the battery, it's kind of, I don't know, doesn't seem right. But a Raspberry Pi 2 with a bunch of USB peripherals to hook everything up like over there, Linux console only, 5 watts consumption. That's fantastic. And I think at the Python meetup, I think it was Doc Savage who presented, showing his awesome terminal-only, no GUI workflow at the San Diego Python meetup. It was very inspirational too, and got me headed off in this direction. There's a library called Prompt Toolkit. It's awesome. It's a misnomer of a name. It does do some command line prompting kind of stuff, kind of like click, that I think folks have presented here before in the past, I remember. But it's also a full-featured TUI, Text User Interface API. It's exactly like writing with a GUI API. So if you use PySide to Qt5 to write applications, it's just like that. You've got widgets, composite widgets, inheritance, events, signals, the event loop, exactly like that. It's designed to run on an ANSI terminal, so it should be very cross-platform, just like Python and PySide Qt. And if my friends hate the text user interface, I can easily port the software I wrote to it. I can just rewrite it easily enough. It'll translate easily to PySide. The Prompt Toolkit, folks, the guy who did that has a program called PyVim. It's Vim written in Python using Prompt Toolkit. Dog fooding, awesome. I have to try it out. I think that'd be entertaining. You can find out more, read the docs. And just in this introduction, they talk about the command line stuff, but they have a simple application example. And this looks a lot like the very bare bones PySide one too. Import your library, instantiate an app, and run the app to start the event loop. So if folks want to see code, so I'm going to have a little show and tell afterwards, people can take a look at, see a running program, hardware, all that kind of stuff. If people want to poke and look at code, we can look at a little bit of code, but I'm not daring enough to do a live code demo, unlike Jay. So how much was the effort? How big, how little, how much did it take to do this? So at the end of one contest that was in the first weekend of October, and there's another one coming up a month later, I said, okay, go, I'm going to do this. Took less than a month, didn't have to spend that much time on it. It's very full-featured. I didn't try to do the networking side of things. It's only 1,000 lines of code. So it really was a tiny application. So why go and use some proprietary closed source freeware thing when I've got something that's even better, nuisance free and all that. So I did leverage existing network protocols. There's an old one that's bundled with all the Unix distributions called CW Daemon. You send packets to it with content and it will toggle one of the handshake lines on serial port that you can wire up for the Morse code sending, so you're not banging out on a telegraph key. And then the other one is a rig-controlled daemon, which will interface with the radios. All the modern radios will have a computer interface that you can use to tune the radio or find out what frequency it's tuned to or to transmit, to control the radio. So the hardware, I'll have the radio hooked up to the computer and a keyboard, no mouse. The keyer is a box that will do electronic keying with a set of paddles, and you can play with that here during show and tell time. But oh, I have a line missing here. There should be a line from the computer to the keyer as well. So the computer can have the keyer send Morse code, or the paddles, you can send the Morse code by hand. And the software is just this new experimental contest logger. PyWin keyer, that's up on GitHub. It's a Python implementation of that protocol for a USB peripheral I've got an example of here, instead of toggling the serial line handshake, and that existing rig control daemon, which I haven't rewritten yet. So again, lifetime solution for me, vehicle experiment. Now it's really a path to my real goal. I really want to see an open, interoperable networking standard for these contest logging software, because then you can mix and match what you bring for the multi-op stuff, because again, all this stuff is very highly user preference. Everybody's got their own preferences on user interface, UX kind of stuff. And I really think it'd be great if me and my friends would get together for a multi-op contest. Everybody can bring their own computers and interfaces and keypads and whatever customization they want to do. And it should all be able to talk together. That's what I'd really like to see happen. So anyways, that's it. We'll have some show and tell time down here. And we'll show a running prompt toolkit user interface. And hopefully it'll be noisy. I don't know how you want to transition, or if you're going to cut it down, shut it down. Or... yes. David, so bad.
Oh. Are you gonna, are you swapping computers? You did something?
I'm going to swap to that computer.
Okay, I'm gonna just move the tripod. And see what happens.
Live demo. No pressure.
Good luck.
Yeah. And folks can probably come down, because I'm not going to project on the screen, because I did not set up for that. So, all right.
Let's see if the magic happens here.
So this will be very different than usual, but we'll make it happen. All right. So
Hey, it worked.
here is an amateur radio transceiver. It happens to be designed from somebody who grew up in San Diego. Here's the keying device that will key this for Morse code stuff. Here's a paddle. So in the old days, you'd send by hand. This is an electronic keying device, so this forms the dits and das electronically, so that they're well formed and easier for people to listen to, versus the old telegraph key where the timing is done by hand and can be very interesting, we'll say. In this case, so there's actually two switch contacts on here. One's for dits and the other's for das. This is a single lever paddle, so I can only close one of those two switches at a time, but they also make a dual lever paddles. There's two of them, you can squeeze them together, so when they're both closed at the same time, it alternates back and forth between the dits and das, but I don't use that kind, but it's very popular. So I'm going to start the software that runs the daemon for sending on this. I'm going to start the software that's got the rig control interface on there, and then I'll start up the logger. And actually, can I make that screen brighter? Because that is...
Is this one of those digital radios where you can change the frequencies?
Yeah, come on over and take a look. So there's a tuning knob, tune around, but the computer interface, there's a serial port interface, and there's a command protocol, so you can tell it to change to any frequency or any band. You can ask it, is it in voice mode or Morse code mode? There's a lot of, there's a microprocessor on board for all this UX up here, all the buttons and knobs and everything. It's all through a microprocessor on here, so there's a serial port connection with the protocol for computer interfacing and automation for that. Now, the microphone input and the audio output, you can actually go into a sound card, and then you can do all your modem DSP stuff on a PC, and people do that. And you can do coding gain stuff, or stuff that's good for bouncing off of meteor trails, and all kinds of crazy stuff that people do. So Let's see here.
And how might that compare to something like a pitaya, like other SDR things? Like, is that what they're doing?
So, yeah, so the red pitaya, yeah, the pitaya, you're using the PC for the DSP part, right? So, yeah, so the difference would be, the big one is you're using the audio DAC and ADC with your sound card instead of the pitaya's got probably a higher bandwidth data converters on board. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just, in this case, the RF frequencies or the bands I can go to are dependent on this radio head end here, whereas the pitaya is built in there and whatever their tuning thing supports for that. So this is a 10-watt transceiver, but there's an extra control line stuff. So you can take, instead of hooking up an antenna, you can hook up an amplifier, then the antenna, and you can go up to the legal limit as well. So, but this is just a 10-watt radio. This covers from about 1.8 megahertz to 50 megahertz, and there's about 9 or 10 amateur radio bands over that range. So, okay, so let me start one of these. So start.
What kind of range can you get that without relays?
Oh, yeah. So that's another talk that I gave to the Amateur Radio Club here at work recently. The channel, what's between the two endpoints matters. So, you know, it might be telephone wires, it might be a piece of coax, it might be fiber optic. For like a couple of walkie-talkies FRS walkie-talkies you buy, the channel's just line of sight between you and the other location, plus maybe a bounce off of the ground. You know, like when you're listening to FM radio, you get that picket fencing sometimes driving in your car because the direct path and the bounce, and they combine or constructively, destructively, depending exactly where you're at. But shortwave, the thing that's special about that is the upper part of the ionosphere. The sun hits that, ionizes it. Now the dielectric constant changes, so radio signals within a certain frequency range will hit that, and they will refract and bend back down. So now you can go over the horizon, right? That's actually what over the horizon radar does too. So shortwave broadcast, amateur radio, all that kind of stuff. There's many different services over the years using shortwave, but so like between here and Hawaii, it'll be like one hop off the ionosphere to talk to Hawaii. But you get over to Japan, it might hit the ionosphere, bounce down, hit the ocean, bounce off of that, do another hop, right? The ionization depends on the sun. We're actually moving up into the upper part of the 11-year sunspot cycle right now, so propagation on shortwave has been changing recently, and it's quite exciting for people to get into that. Yeah, so around the world, if the ionosphere and everything's cooperating with you. If it's not cooperating with you, you've got a planet between you and the other station, and it's very difficult. So that's what the internet's for, and $1 trillion worth of infrastructure, right? So, but there's a huge range of spectrum, not just shortwave for the amateur radio service. So microwave, VLF, and the propagation's different across the spectrum, like the mechanisms and things that happen. So you know, it's the amateur radio license is a license to learn, as some folks say, and you know, you can get a lot of, you know, there's all the book learning, but then, you know, it's like in school with the other things we learn, there's the book learning, but then there's the practical component to it too, and amateur radio combines with that too. So, but there's other, if you look at the FCC rules, the very first section, basis and purpose, is the single best description of what the amateur radio service is about. Any other description is lacking. So, you know, there's public value, there's emergency communication stuff, there's a pool of trained operators and technical folks who get experience, all kinds of things too. So, and I left things out because I didn't read off the whole sheet. So, let's see, we'll leave that on. That's fun. So this is the program that provides a network protocol to send the Morse code that I wrote in Python up on GitHub. Let me start this one here. Okay, hopefully that works. It looks like that worked. Great. Okay, and which one was I going to do here? Do a simple one. So This is horrible contrast here, isn't it? So, wow, this is very old school. Remember DOS? So these are widgets, these are label widgets up here on the top, and there's some text entry widgets. I actually have only I'm capturing events for the whole thing, so I just have a single event capture portion of the screen, and I drive these widgets with those because I don't want focus problems, was my biggest concern. So up here it's got the function keys labeled, and it says what those will do. So if I push that one, it's going to send a CQ message, meaning I'm calling stations. The next one's going to send my call sign. So I've got these abbreviations or jargon in here to say what these are. Again, that's one I use a lot because I didn't quite get that. So just ask the other station to send their information again because I'm not that good at Morse code. There's 5 lines here that have the 5 most recent entries in the log. So we've got timestamp, date, stamp, timestamp, frequency, mode, my call sign, my report, serial number, his call sign, his report, his serial number. Over here, so I've got the speed for the keyer, so I can crank that up. So that tells me what the keyer speed is. Now if I send that message again, okay, I don't understand that. That's way too fast for me. But I can crank it down, make it really slow. Hit escape because I don't want to continue sending that. I've got the mode. I've got a search and pass mode and a run mode because that changes a little bit of the automation behavior between those. And I've got the status for the enter send mode because that's a bit of a state machine. And then here I've got my information that I'm going to send, and I can key in stuff for them. So if I hear somebody's call sign, let's see, I'm searching. Okay, so search and passing, I'll type in his call sign. And when I start typing in the call sign, it's putting some information in here. It's already looked at the country database to see from the prefix, it knows that's a North America station. So the call sign prefixes tell you what, through ITU convention, tells you what nation somebody's in. There's a few special cases. Any Chuck Norris fans? So Delta Force, in the end, he's hopping on the airplane with that janky hand-painted American flag on the tail, and you see the call letters is, I think, 4X or 4Z something something, and that's Israel because they filmed it in Israel. So the call tail letters, you know, it's an Israeli aircraft. So so around the airports, you can tell what country the airplanes are from just from the tail number prefix. But for this particular contest that I've got this configured for that I started up, it's a DX contest, so we're actually interested in knowing what different countries people are in. I don't have all the prefixes memorized, but this tool will tell me. And down here, there's a bunch of call signs listed because I started typing in W1A, and it's got all these call signs that begin with W1A, and that's from the database of known contesters to help give me a hint in terms of what that may be. So I type in his call, so I'm searching pants and I hear W1AW, I hear him and that's going to be too slow. But the enter send mode has got some automation, so I just type in his call sign, I hit enter, it sends my call sign, and he hears me. I'm like, great, he came back. He starts telling me what I need to write down for him. I go over to the next field here and I type, he's going to give me serial number 4. So I write down 4 and I hit return. It's already logged it, but it's telling him my information. And then it's done, I can go look for the next station. And then in run mode, I can have it automatically call CQ and do similar sorts of things. I've got another example.
So for something like this, you don't need to know Morse code.
So our general practice is we always listen to it by head. We transcribe it by head. We don't machine copy, but you can use machine copying techniques. But in real world, you got a lot of noise and interference and people sending by hand. And I don't know how good the current machine decoding is. I know of at least one guy working on that, and he's building a training set to try to do better. With machine sent code, because I'm machine sending it here, the timing's not by hand, it's easier to copy by machine. And there's actually a network of receivers people have around the world, and there's software running, and they'll listen to the entire band, and it's trying to decode all the Morse code on the band at the same time. And when it hears people calling, it makes note of their call sign, how loud they are, and it sends it into a data aggregator. And then on this website, you can see all the stations that are transmitting right now, where they're at, how loud they're heard by, who they're heard by. And there's similar aggregator systems, robot receiver systems for some of the digital modes, some of the high coding gain modes, which can hear very, very weak signals. So see propagation that's there and stuff. So that stuff's entertaining too. I'm going to do one that's got a little bit more configured for a little bit more. Let's do.
The military still has people hand do code. It's kind of a solved problem if a machine is sending Morse code, but when a human is doing it, it's actually an open problem and just like kind of unsolved right now.
That sounds like a machine learning problem.
You would think so, but because there's so much variation in how humans express, like it becomes a natural language problem.
Sure.
Yeah, plus you've got the different Morse codes for the different alphabets too. So I know there's folks who've been intercept operators and they've talked a little bit about that, and so they may not know the language, but they're copying the different character sets in Morse code for, you know, like katakana in Japanese and things like that. Or no, that's not the right name for it. But just for the different character sets, there's different. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name for the Japanese Morse code though, and that's been too long since I've read about that. But there's a Japanese version. I don't know if it's a hiragana alphabet or what it is, but I'd have to look and see again. And I would imagine like Cyrillic alphabets and things like that. So, so here I typed in a call sign, and it's got some stuff here. It actually shows a previous contact that I have in the log for them. So if I've already worked them before, it'll come up with information, because for this particular contest, I can work them once per band per mode, meaning I could work them once on each band. I could work them once on Morse code, once again on voice, and once again on a digital mode. So it's nice to see that history, because if I'm doing Morse code and I'm trying to understand what they're saying and seeing what they had told us before, and hopefully we copied it correctly before, they'll help hint to make sure we copy it correctly again this time. So again, they'll cross-reference logs. You send in your electronic logs and they'll cross-reference them, and you get a log checking report, and it's kind of embarrassing what you did or did not copy correctly. But in this case, so I've got these data entry fields, and for this event, there's a field where you have one field that's a numeric code and an alphanumeric code, but it's not all of the alphabetic characters. So if I write like 23B, it's highlighted, because again, it's like using the GUI API. So as soon as I type in a valid field entry, it'll highlight that to help me know that I've entered the right thing. Because if somebody sends something wrong and there's interference, like the letter X is not valid here, so it's not going to highlight this now. But if I type in a valid entry here, it'll highlight that. And then here they have, for this particular event, they've got 84 different geographic locators for the United States and Canada, plus DX. So if I type in DX, it'll highlight that. If I just type in D, that's not a valid one. Was it MDC for Maryland, Washington, D.C., so it'll highlight that. So that helps. I've got a lot of those memorized, but you know, if it's the middle of the night, because it's a 24-hour contest, I'm tired, this helps me to remember and check things like that. So anyways, so super happy with Prompt Toolkit. So glad that Doc Savage prompted me to dive into this project. And you know, I looked around to see, and there's a couple of possible candidates, but Prompt Toolkit was the winner. And I was, again, very impressed with how GUI API-like it was to do and write something that was exactly what I wanted, you know. But again, everybody's got personal preferences, so. If anybody wants to play with anything, touch stuff, have at it. Anybody have any questions?
With the setup with the computer, do you need the little contacts, or can you just put like 1 and 2?
Oh, I mean, so I had the logging software sending, but I can also hit Control K, and now I can do keyboard sending. So I can type in I can talk to somebody by keyboard sending, and it'll do the keying, so I don't have to reach over here. So I don't have to reach over here and use the panel. So yeah, exactly. Well, it's the original digital mode, because you're, yeah. So. But
Any questions from anybody?
No, that's very cool.
Very cool.
and if I change bands and stuff, the frequency here updates too. That's the one thing I'm doing with the rig interfaces. You know, if I change bands, that's important stuff to record. And that's the kind of thing, if I had to like, if I had to type in I'm on new band on the computer, that's the kind of thing I'm gonna forget to do, and I do every single time. So having that rig interface so that it automatically is recording the correct band and the log information is super useful too. So that and the timestamp, that alone's worth, I don't need anything else, just that alone is a huge help.
That's
So
the rig control demon.
yes, yes.
So with typing, you have words per minute. Is there a similar?
Yep. So
The faster it is.
like a general conversation, I can listen to 15 words a minute or so, a little bit more. Contesting, I'll go about 30 words a minute. 35, around 40 or so, I'm not copying very well. For call sign, you got canned format. And it's just like the information theory stuff we learned, right? So if you have a, you know, even though you have a total space of a whole bunch of symbols you can have of a certain length, but in this case we have a limited vocabulary, so when you're listening, you're doing all the information theory stuff, oh, that's close to something that I would expect here, right? So you can do a little bit of error correction kind of things there. So, but the really good, there are high-speed operators, and they can listen, you know, 60, 80 words a minute. There's some high-speed telegraphy contests, and they'll have like sending competitions, and I've watched some videos on YouTube. It's just crazy because it's just like just hearing this faster than what I had that thing cranked up to, right? And it's just like, and they're just sending by hand. And then the copying, they copy, you know, 60, 80 words a minute kind of stuff.
Do you still have to know Morse code in order to get an amateur radio?
For the license, Morse code has not been required for some time now.
That's what I thought.
Nowadays, you can take the exam over Zoom.
Yep, I did that over COVID.
The
They
exam,
have you like scan your whole house.
the FCC allows the examiners to charge up to $15 for admin fees. The local team did not charge anything because they had their expenses easily covered after a short period of time. The FCC instituted a $35, I think, license fee when you do paperwork because there was a congressional act saying that the government agencies need to charge for their services, so they did not used to charge for that. But there's 3 tiers of licenses, technician, general, and extra. The first 2, the exam size is about the same size. The extra, it's a larger exam. The question pool is published, multiple choice, with answers. So everybody and their uncle has written a program or a website to do practice exams. There's a guy in Michigan, KB6NU, who has a study guide that is a cram study guide. It's very dense, and it's what I use when I do a license class every year. And you can Google that up, and you can get that PDF or smartphone, whatever format. He charges, it's free for the first level license. He charges for the second and third. Hamstudy.org is the website we use for that class during the class to review the material. There are some books that are published. The ARRL study guide is good. If you need more than just that bare cram, if you want at least a tiny bit of background explanation, I would recommend the ARRL study guide.
I almost got my license back when I was a teenager.
Lots of people come back at it later on, so.
My dad did a lot of, he worked all states and,
Yep.
you know, which back then was a big deal.
You didn't have spotting networks and all that, so
Yeah, I mean, it was all.
play with it if you want.
We had about a 30-foot antenna
Yep.
attached to the side of the house.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That'd be pretty nice, so. HOAs now.
They don't let you have 30-foot antennas.
Apparently, I think they're a thing of beauty, but some people don't, apparently.
Well,
They probably also don't like the plants I have in the front yard or the color I painted the door.
yeah, well, that's a whole different story.
You be you.
But yeah, the entry-level license, you get full privileges from 50 megahertz and up, and you get some limited HF privileges, including some phone privileges and some data mode privileges.
Do people ever actually talk to other people anymore?
Yeah, yeah.
Or, I mean, it's just, I mean, because that
I
was.
mean,
one-
you can
I
find your, you
remember
can
I
find
was-
your mega frequency,
I
you can
was
find
maybe-
whatever you want to talk about, so.
Okay, well, I was like 12 or something, and there was a
I
family
went there on the live stream.
from
Should
India
be bad comments now. Hi, everybody.
that my dad used to talk to this guy fairly regularly.
Uh-huh.
Certain times.
He had a schedule when they would chat.
Yeah,
Yep, yep.
and
Same
one day they
bat
came.
time, same bat frequency.
They came to the U.S. and they visited us.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
you
amazing.
know, it was very cool.
Yeah.
And then I remember he got all excited when he got Eritrea.
Oh.
Yeah, so the people who, so there's a million different activities, and
Yeah, I
some
know.
people try to work as many different locations around the world as possible, and they collect that, and they've got a scoring system, because people have to make a competition out of everything. But right now, North Korea is the tough one, because they do not allow amateur radio in North Korea, as you might imagine, so.
Yeah, I don't think they did when I was
Yeah.
in Taiwan.
Yeah, it hasn't been,
if they do
there hasn't been a legal operation there for a long time, so.
Yeah, yeah. But my dad used to take the 2-meter band.
Yep.
Little
Yep.
handheld 2-meter thing out with the mountain rescue people.
Oh, yeah, there's still people, there's some SAR guys in town I know. Some of them are very serious mountaineers, and yeah, they use the amateur radio stuff too, so.
So you don't mean it can only go 2 meters, right?
No, it's
That's
the
the
band,
wavelength.
the bandwidth is
They're,
2
they're
meters.
describing
okay.
the frequency by how big the wave is.
Because that was
the antennas
way
are
before cell
tuned
phones,
to
and even now
how
there's
big
no
of a
cell
wave
phones
you're
in
using.
a lot of that
So
area.
the
But-
wave from top to bottom is 2 meters?
One cycle, at the frequency, light travels 2 meters in the time that the frequency does one cycle. So 1 over 150 megahertz travels about 2 meters, and the speed of light in 1 over 150 megahertz, that's how much time it takes to travel 2 meters. So the wavelength, then the natural size for an efficient antenna is proportional to the wavelength, sort of, also. So for shortwave, you're looking at, maybe 80 meters or 10 meters, so the antennas are larger. But 2 meters, you have a smaller antenna, like maybe a small whip you'd see on a car, right? The state police still uses something around 6 meters, so you see those larger whip antennas on the state police cars. But then, in the city, they'll use 800 megahertz and stuff like that, so you see smaller whip antennas on those.
Anyway, so that-
Or AM broadcast, the towers are very large because they're maybe a quarter wavelength tall, and for AM broadcast, you're looking around 300 meters wavelength. So FM broadcast is 3 meters roughly. So FM broadcast antennas, like the ones sometimes you see people put on the roof, would be a smaller type of affair than a shortwave antenna. So.
What do you call the, do people still do the postcard thing? Probably
Yep.
not.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, oh, they do?
Yeah.
Oh, they do, yeah.
There's now, you can now do cloud version of that too if you want,
Oh, I'm sure.
cryptographically signed and whatnot.
I just,
Oh my gosh.
my dad passed in '94,
Yeah.
and I don't think he had done any radio for, at least 5 years or more.
But he's
before
still
that.
getting cards, huh?
And yeah, in 2001, a card came.
Yep.
I'm like, what the hell? I forget where it was from. What happened was that it was from somebody in, like, Japan or,
Mhm.
I don't remember, it was, a long time ago. But, and they had talked to my dad, and they came to the U.S. on a visit.
Oh,
And then
okay.
they sent the
Mail
card.
order,
They
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
didn't send it at the time,
Right,
you
right.
know, that they talked. But that was interesting.
Yeah, so some of the rules and stuff have changed over the years. You don't need to know Morse code.
Sure.
Used to have to record a logbook, but you don't have to do that now, unless you get in trouble and they ask you to record one, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, we want to talk about that.
But,
That's very cool.
That's
Thanks
very
for
cool.
bringing that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
well, I had to
a
have
lot.
some hardware plugged into Python. That was
Yeah.
the key thing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks so much for sharing.
I'm going to take the microphone.
All right.
All right. Pretty much wraps up the meetup. Thank you for coming. Please take food on your way out, because there's stickers out there too and some other giveaways, but please take the food, because otherwise, like, somebody has to take it home. So please take food. You can become a speaker. I want to thank our sponsors again, Microsoft, who provided the food, Qualcomm, who provides the venue.
You do got to be out of the building by 9 o'clock, unless you're a Qualcomm employee. You can stay here as long as you want, I think. Yeah, thank you for coming, and we'll be here on the 3rd Thursday in December. The 15th. All right.
Already 2 speakers.
Yeah.